a young girl on the run, a trafficker hiding in plain sight, and a retired canine who defies every command to save her. In the chaos of an international airport, one broken keychain and a dog's instinct uncover a secret that could shake a nation. This is not just a story about survival. It's about courage, memory, and a bond that refused to be silenced. If you believe stories like this matter, don't forget to like and subscribe. What happens next will stay with you. The morning sun spilled through the vast glass windows of JFK International Airport, casting long, clean lines across the tiled floor. People rushed with rolling suitcases, murmuring into phones, clutching coffee cups, chasing boarding times and connections. In the middle of all this mundane chaos stood a girl, small, thin, with skin the color of warm chestnut and wide, dark eyes that scanned her surroundings, like someone who wasn't used to being seen. Her name was Amira. She looked about 10, maybe younger. Dressed in a plain blue hoodie and jeans that were slightly too big, she stood beside a tall man in a pressed beige trench coat and wire-rimmed glasses. His hair was neat, his expression calm, almost sterile. He had one hand resting on the girl's shoulder. It was a gesture that, from afar, might seem protective, almost fatherly. They waited in the check-in line like everyone else. When it was their turn, the man stepped forward with measured confidence. "Good morning," he greeted the airline agent with a practiced smile. "I'm flying to Madrid with my daughter. Here are our passports, and I have a notarized letter of guardianship with me as well." The agent scanned their documents, glanced at Amira, and smiled politely. "Very organized," she commented, and passed the papers back. "Flight 238, Gate 17A, you're all set." Amira didn't speak. She didn't smile either. Her eyes lingered too long on the floor, too long on the ceiling, and barely touched any person's face. To anyone watching, they looked like a slightly awkward but otherwise unremarkable family traveling abroad. But just down the terminal, something stirred. Bruno was a 6-year-old German Shepherd, a veteran canine assigned to TSA's Behavioral Detection Unit. His handler, Officer Elena Torres, had worked with him for 3 years. Together, they were trained not just in explosive and narcotic detection, but in something harder to quantify: fear. Human fear had a scent. The body gave off chemicals when terrified, and Bruno knew it better than most machines ever could. They were passing near the check-in lanes when Bruno slowed, his ears pivoting slightly. His gait became tighter, more alert. Galina barely noticed it at first. She was focused on a tablet reviewing passenger flow statistics. But when Bruno stopped cold, his front paw slightly lifted, body rigid, she looked up. "What is it, bud?" he asked under her breath. Bruno didn't bark. He never barked unless necessary. He simply stared ahead, across the terminal. Elena followed his gaze, a girl and a man, walking calmly past the main coffee stand. The girl's hands were tucked in the sleeves of her hoodie. Her posture was still. Too still. Bruno's nose twitched, drawing in the air. His breath shortened, shallow and rhythmic. Elena frowned. She knew this pattern. She'd seen it in domestic violence cases, missing person interventions, even attempted kidnappings. But there was no visual cue. The man had documents, the girl wasn't resisting. There were no threats, no chaos. "Elena to base," she murmured into her shoulder radio. He had a soft flag gate side. 2 individuals, white male, late 40s, African-American female child, around 10. "No immediate cause for escalation, but my canine is showing stress indicators." "Copy. Eyes only for now," the voice replied in her earpiece. "Roger," Elena said. She didn't move toward them, just watched. Bruno strained against the leash, not to attack, not to chase, but as if pulled by something deeply unsettling. Something his instincts screamed was wrong. Meanwhile, Amira kept walking. Her steps were obedient, quiet. Her mouth was closed and her eyes kept darting sideways like she was memorizing exits. When they reached a bench near Gate 17A, the man told her to sit, while he checked something at the nearby cafe. Amira obeyed. She sat still. Her backpack, pink with faded stars on it, rested on her lap. Bruno's handler walked a wide loop, keeping her dog at a controlled pace. Elena glanced back at her screen, no active alerts. The man was registered as Nicholas Braun, for full paperwork from social services confirming temporary guardianship. Still, Bruno wouldn't let it go. Elena made a note in her app. K9 reacted at gate 17A, subject minor female, no overt indicators. Dog showed elevated sniff behavior and stiffness. Proceed with passive observation. When Nicholas returned with 2 hot chocolates, he handed one to Amira. She flinched before taking it. Not enough to notice, but Bruno noticed. 10 minutes later, the pair boarded their flight. Elena watched them pass the gate agent and disappear into the walkway. Bruno stood unmoving, here still focused toward the direction they vanished. Something gnawed at Elena. Protocol said to log the incident and move on. But Bruno had only ever reacted this way 3 times before, and in all 3, the person in question had been either fleeing abuse or actively in danger. The aircraft doors closed. Bruno let out a low, drawn-out whine. Elena placed her hand gently on his side. "I know, boy," she whispered. "I feel it too." She looked down at the form on her screen, her thumb hovering over but instead of submitting it, she saved it to a flagged folder, adding one line: "Request cross-checked with Child Welfare Database. Follow-up advised." Back on the plane, Amira pressed her forehead against the cold window. The sky outside was gray. The man beside her spoke softly about what Madrid would be like. The food, the sunshine, the museums. She didn't respond. Her left hand clutched her necklace, and her knuckles turned white. She didn't know the name of the city, but she knew one thing: if that plane took off, she might never see home again. Bruno didn't settle. Even after the airplane's gate closed and the terminal noise shifted back to its usual rhythm, the K9 kept pivoting, glancing toward the glass panels that overlooked the tarmac. His body remained tense, his eyes restless. Officer Elena Torres stood beside him, one hand lightly on his harness, the other holding a checklist of her patrol shift. She had already logged the interaction with the girl and the man as low-level observation, no escalation, and her supervisors had instructed her to move on to the next terminal quadrant. But Bruno didn't understand protocol, nor did he trust it. What he trusted were his senses, and every cell in his body screamed that something had gone wrong. They began their route through Concourse D, weaving past shops and gate areas, but every time they turned away from gate 17A, Bruno hesitated, lagging behind. His ears perked toward the direction of the closed boarding gate. "Come on, Bruno," Elena muttered. "We're done with that one. Let it go." Bruno didn't resist outright, but his gait remained reluctant, and he kept looking over his shoulder, as if waiting for someone to notice what he couldn't explain in words. To the untrained eye, he looked like a slightly stubborn dog distracted by movement. But Elena had worked with him long enough to know the difference between distraction and instinct. Still, without hard data, she had no authority to halt a flight or request more than a basic review. She sighed and made a mental note to rewatch the CCTV footage later, when she was off duty. Inside the aircraft, Amira sat motionless. Her tray table was down, untouched. The small cup of juice the flight attendant had brought earlier sat sweating beside her, full. Nicholas Braun, the man beside her, scrolled through his phone, occasionally glancing her way. "You're being very good," he said softly, his tone rehearsed, casual. "Just a short nap and we'll be somewhere new. A fresh start." Amira, she kept her fingers clenched tightly around a small object in her hoodie pocket. A chipped plastic keychain shaped like a galloping horse. Painted once in silver, now faded to dull gray. Her sister had given it to her 3 years ago, the last Christmas before everything fell apart. It was the only thing Amira had managed to keep through the transfers, the shelters, the names she had to learn to answer to. That little horse was the only part of her life she'd ever chosen to carry. Now she held it as tightly as she could. Back in the terminal, passengers bustled in overlapping tides. At Gate 19, a flight to Dallas had been delayed due to a maintenance issue, and a crowd gathered near the counter, growing restless. Among them was an off-duty flight attendant named Sarah Kim, still in her navy blue uniform, wheeling a small suitcase and sipping from an iced coffee. She was cutting through the terminal toward the exit, when a movement near the far corner of the glass caught her eye. A little girl had dropped something, a small keychain maybe, and bent quickly to pick it up. For a moment, Sarah barely noticed, but then, just as the girl reached down, her face turned slightly. Their eyes met, even for a breath. It was in that moment Sarah felt something pierce through the airport noise. That child wasn't just retrieving a lost trinket. Her eyes, wide and glassy, were screaming. It wasn't loud, and it wasn't obvious, but it was raw. Then, in a swift motion, the man next to the girl reached down and yanked her up by the elbow. Not rough enough to draw attention from others, but with a grip too firm to be fatherly. Sarah blinked, took a step forward. The pair disappeared into the crowd near Gate 17A. She hesitated. The airport ran on stories like this, people rushing, children crying, parents dragging sleepy kids to connecting flights. She told herself it was nothing. Still, as she walked on, something in her gut twisted, and she slowed down. She turned back once. The man and the girl were gone. Sarah kept walking, but now with the image burned behind her eyes. A child's hand clenching a toy, a desperate glance, and a man too focused on looking harmless. She made her way to the staff terminal, but couldn't shake it. Meanwhile, Bruno stopped moving entirely. Elena turned to face him. "Seriously?" she muttered. "You're still keyed up?" She crouched next to him, looked into his eyes and saw it, the quiet defiance, the refusal to move on. Her fingers tightened around the leash. Her training said to follow orders. Her instincts, and Bruno's, said something else. She tapped her dispatch. "This is Torres, requesting 5-minute hold at current position. Can you pull camera 47 dead from 15 minutes ago? I want to confirm passenger movement near gate 17. There was a pause. "You have an incident to report?" "Not formally, just a gut thing. Mine and the dogs," she replied. "I want to check something." "Copy that," came the voice. "Footage loading, stand by." As she waited, she checked her notes again. Nicholas Braun. Temporary guardianship of one Amira Louise Carter, filed in Baltimore County 2 weeks prior. Nothing in the system stood out. But now that she was second-guessing, she realized something. The document had listed custodial handoff from a shelter in Baltimore, but no details. No background check. It was as if someone had submitted only the surface layer and no one had looked deeper. At the same time, in a nearby security room, an assistant pulled up the footage and skimmed through it. He paused at a frame showing Nicholas lifting the girl slightly by the upper arm. Then fast forward. That's when he noticed Sarah Kim, pausing mid-walk, looking directly at the girl. He made a note of it. Then he rewound again, slower this time, trying to catch the child's expression. Frame, the flicker of fear, too quick for most people to notice, froze in one still. Amira looking up, her eyes locked on a stranger, the toy slipping from her hand, a visual plea. Back on the plane, Amira sat with her knees drawn up, the keychain now hidden again in her palm. Nicholas leaned back and closed his eyes. The engines began to power up, the cabin lights dimming slightly as the final announcements came over the speakers. Flight 238 was preparing for takeoff. Elena didn't know it yet, but the next 5 minutes would decide whether that plane left the ground, or whether everything about that little girl's story would be lost at 30,000 feet. In the digital surveillance room tucked behind Terminal D, rows of monitors blinked in steady rhythm, each one capturing and feeding live footage from over 500 cameras scattered across the airport. The AI analytics software ran 24/7, designed to flag behavioral anomalies, track suspicious movements, and reduce human error by scanning for pre-made gestures of distress. But like all systems built on patterns, it struggled with nuance, and nuance was all Amira had left. When Elena's request was logged, the system prioritized footage from camera 47D, time-stamped precisely 17 minutes before boarding. The AI's algorithm scanned the segment where Amira bent to pick up her keychain, and Nicholas yanked her back up. In milliseconds, it ran a behavioral correlation check against its existing family. Parent-child tension during travel was common, often misread. Within a few seconds, a green tag appeared in the corner of the playback window. No threat detected. Paternal interaction, 86% confidence. An operator glanced over, saw the label, and moved on to the next flagged report, which involved a backpack left unattended near the food court. Elena hadn't received the footage yet. She was pacing the hallway near the TSA K9 rest zone, checking her messages while Bruno sat beside her, eyes alert, breath steady. His training didn't rely on screens. It relied on scent, on shifts in energy, on things that lived beyond the algorithm. And something still wasn't right. When she finally pulled up the compressed footage from the AI system on her handheld tablet, Elena watched it once through, her brow furrowed. From this angle, Nicholas Braun looked like a slightly impatient parent guiding a distracted child. But then she noticed the frame where the girl locked eyes with someone off-screen. She paused the video, zoomed in. There it was again, a flicker of desperation so small, so fast, it had evaded the AI's blunt calculation. Elena muttered under her breath. "You missed it, didn't you?" She saved the still frame and uploaded it to her encrypted personal drive. Something about this didn't sit right. Just as she was about to file an internal note requesting an identity trace on Nicholas, Bruno began to stir again. He rose to his feet, ears pulled forward, body leaning slightly eastward toward a flow of passengers just exiting another gate. Elena looked up and saw the source, a wave of arriving travelers from Flight 19, many of them international, with carry-ons and backpacks of all shapes and colors. Bruno's nose twitched sharply. He tugged the leash, not with urgency, but with purpose. Elena narrowed her eyes. "All right, let's see what's got your attention now." She let him lead her into the flow, weaving between rolling luggage and distracted tourists. Bruno slowed near a column where a few passengers had stopped to check signs, then approached a janitor's cart parked against the wall. His attention wasn't on the people. It was on a lingering scent trail, faint but distinct, that led toward a row of seating benches. There, buried among the odors of coffee, cleaning solvent, and sweat, Brunello picked up something else. Decay masked with citrus, tension buried under deodorant and antiseptic, a distinct mix of fear and restraint. His body stiffened near a specific bench, the one Nicholas Braun and a mirror had briefly occupied before boarding their flight. The scent was stale but present. Elena followed closely, her training kicking in. She reached into her vest and pulled out a chemical sensor strip, holding it to the air for several seconds. The readout blinked yellow, traces of isopropyl alcohol, mild ammonia, and, faintly, chlorhexidine, an antiseptic used in first aid, sometimes to sterilize wounds, but also to mask the organic smell of blood or long unwashed skin. Her breath caught. This combination wasn't typical for public seating, but it was consistent with someone attempting to sterilize or suppress human scent, or possibly mask the lingering chemical residue from restraints or confinement. She crouched beside Bruno, running her hand gently along his neck. "Good boy," she whispered. "You're not letting this go, are you?" Bruno gave a low huff through his nose and kept sniffing along the trail, stopping again near a trash bin where Elena noticed a torn corner of nylon fabric, possibly from a backpack strap. She bagged it in a small evidence pouch and marked the location on her device. It wasn't enough to act on yet, but it was something. She contacted dispatch again, requesting chemical trace logs from bench sector D17B and trash bin 9A. Also need to reprocess Flight 238's security clearance. Focus on carry-ons near seats 24 through 27. Reason for reprocessing? Came the reply. K9 flagged residual chemical scent consistent with concealed restraint indicators. And I don't care what your AI says, that man didn't look like a dad. Not to the dog, not to me. Back in the plane, 30,000 feet above the ocean, Amira sat stiffly beside Nicholas, pretending to sleep. Her eyelids were closed, but her fingers traced every worn edge of the keychain hidden in her sleeve. She had hidden it in her mouth once, years ago, when a caseworker tried to take it away. Since then, she'd never let it out of her reach. Her stomach churned from the flight's turbulence and something deeper, a knowing. She'd overheard a conversation 2 nights ago in the motel room, just after he'd taken her from the last group home. Another man had been on the phone, speaking in Spanish, discussing arrival, price, and something about no scars still intact. She hadn't understood every word, but she understood the tone. She knew what it meant to be handled, not held. She knew what it meant when no one believed a little girl who didn't scream loud enough. Nicholas leaned back in his seat, swearing idly through photos of boarding passes and fake IDs on his phone, then opening an increased messaging app to confirm arrival time. The message read, landing742.com, contact confirmed. She's compliant. His fingers moved smoothly, like someone who had done this before. Meanwhile, in the airport's operations center, a senior technician noticed the chemical trace request and flagged it as unusual. Elena Torres's name wasn't new. She had a reputation for being sharp, but sometimes too instinctive, as some supervisors called it. Still, something about the wording of her report prompted him to tag it for review. He opened the camera logs, rewatched the footage himself, and frowned. This time, he ignored the AI's family interaction label. He watched the body language frame by frame. Something was off. Not illegal, not yet, but wrong. And just as Bruno sat again, this time in front of the same bench where the scent had begun, Elena noticed something else. A discarded boarding pass stub, folded and partially burned on one edge. She picked it up carefully. It didn't belong to any of the passengers from Flight 109. It was from the Madrid flight. But the name didn't match Nicholas Braun. The tension that had been building in Bruno over the last hour hit a breaking point, just as Elena began cross-referencing the name on the boarding stub with the passenger manifest from Flight 238. The stub listed Daniel Groves, not Nicholas Braun, and the barcode showed it had been scanned at Gate 17A only minutes before departure. Her fingers flew over the touchscreen as she tried to locate surveillance footage that might confirm an identity swap. But Bruno's behavior made focusing impossible. The canine's muscles stiffened, his nose lifted to the air with sudden precision, and then he made a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the leash. Elena instinctively knelt to calm him, placing a firm hand against his flank. But it was too late. In a blink, Bruno twisted hard to the right, dropped his weight low, and lunged. The leash gave a violent snap, and the metal ring of the harness buckle split with a shrill metallic pop. Before Elena could register what was happening, Bruno was gone, a black and tan blur surging through the terminal like a bullet. "Bruno!" she shouted, shoving her tablet into her vest and bolting after him. But he was already 20 feet ahead, cutting through crowds with terrifying precision. Passengers screamed and scattered as the German Shepherd tore through the security checkpoint near Gate 19, his claws clicking against the polished floor. A security officer reached for his holstered taser, but another shouted, "He's law enforcement, stand down." The confusion spread like wildfire, and within seconds, TSA agents dropped into protocol mode. "Code Blue in progress. Clear the line, evacuate civilians," came over the intercom. Automated alarms kicked in. Red lights spun above the checkpoint gates, and a computerized voice announced, "Security lockdown initiated. All non-essential personnel, please remain still." Bruno didn't bark. He didn't slow. He moved with the kind of focus that only years of training and pure instinct could produce. His path curved sharply toward a baggage screening zone where a cart stacked with carry-on luggage was waiting for secondary inspection. At the end of the belt, a blue and gray backpack, standard, unmarked, ordinary, sat unattended for processing. Bruno didn't hesitate. He lunged at it with violent precision, sinking his jaws into the nylon fabric and shaking his head hard, tearing the stitching apart in a single savage motion. The first scream came from a bystander who thought the dog was attacking a person. The second came from an officer who noticed what had spilled out. Clothes flew first. A balled-up sweatshirt, a pack of tissues, a toiletries pouch. Then something else. A small, tightly bound towel wrapped with a shoelace, stained dark at the center, tumbled onto the floor. Bruno released the bag and began pawing at the towel with frantic urgency, whining deep in his throat, circling it once before laying down beside it protectively. Elena reached the scene seconds later, breath heaving, gun still holstered but hand on the grip. "Back up! Nobody touches the dog!" she yelled, forcing her way through the crowd. A TSA agent was already pulling out gloves. Elena snapped on a pair of her own and knelt. She picked up the towel. It was stiff, bound tightly, and when she loosened the shoelace, it fell open with a sickening thud. Inside was a dried smear of what was unmistakably blood, and wedged into the fold was a torn scrap of ruled notebook paper. Elena unfolded it slowly. Written in shaky, childish print were 5 numbers, 10 digits, a phone number, underneath it just 2 words, "Help me." She stared at the paper as her mind caught up. This wasn't luggage from a forgetful passenger. This was a message hidden, maybe planted, maybe missed, until now. Around her, chaos continued to ripple outward. The terminal had gone from a murmur to a roar. Security protocols flared. Officers instructed passengers to hit the floor, heads down, bags abandoned. Parents pulled children close. Announcements crackled from every corner of the airport, warning of an active threat. But for Elena, the noise faded as she looked at Bruno. He was still lying beside the towel, chest rising and falling, tongue lolling slightly from effort, but eyes wide and fixed on her. "You found her," she whispered, gripping the note in one hand. "She's real." Across the terminal, additional officers pushed through the crowd. Some shouting for updates, others raising weapons at empty corners. One shouted, "Where's the suspect?" Another, "Who brought this bag? Do we have eyes on a match?" The bag's tag was gone, scrubbed clean, but Bruno's tracking didn't lie. Elena turned to a supervisor. "I need the flight manifest for Madrid again. I think we have a bag with false routing." She held up the towel. "And this didn't come through security. Someone carried it by hand and planted it." The supervisor blinked, eyes on the bloody cloth, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. At that moment, one of the junior agents near the X-ray scanner waved her over. "Ma'am, we just scanned another bag. It was flagged but never processed. The owner had rushed boarding and claimed they'd already been cleared. You need to see this." Elena followed her to the monitor. The X-ray image showed a second backpack, similar style but a different brand. Inside, nestled among clothing and toiletries, was a flash drive taped to the inside lining and what looked like strips of duct tape, a zip tie, and a small vial. "Pull the bag," Elena said. "I want it opened under supervision." "We don't have the owner ID," the agent said. "No tag, no claim. Who rushed it through?" Maybe naval clays or gray backpack." Elena's stomach turned. "Pull every security camera near gate 17 and the jet bridge 10 minutes before departure." "The flight's in the air," someone reminded her. She didn't respond. Bruno stood now, nose still twitching, but his posture calmer. He had done what he was trying to do. He had intervened. And somewhere in the sky, on a flight Elena could no longer stop with her hands, sat a little girl holding on to the edge of her name like it was a secret only she could keep. Elena looked down at the note again, her mind already racing ahead. "Get me access to that number," she told the tech nearby. "Run it through every system. Shelter logs, CPS, anything you've got." The tech nodded and turned away, but his voice was uncertain. "Even if we find a name, she's already gone." Elena stared at Bruno and said quietly, "Then we bring her back." The moment Bruno's jaws ripped open the backpack, the airport's default response system went into a heightened state of alert. Within minutes, 3 officers from the Tactical Response Unit converged on the scene, weapons lowered but drawn, eyes flicking between the German Shepherd, the shredded bag, and Elena, who still knelt beside the bloody towel and the scrap of paper in her gloved hands. One of the officers, a tall man with a heavy jaw and a badge reading "Bitter," stepped forward. Voice clipped. "Your canine just attacked passenger property. That dog needs to be restrained and removed. You'll both be held for internal review." Elena stood up slowly, her tone calm but firm. "He didn't attack, he intervened." Rowley narrowed his eyes. "With shredded luggage and panicked civilians, ma'am, I don't care how long you've handled that dog. Protocol is protocol." But before Elena could respond, a sharp voice cut through the radio static behind them. "Stand down, that dog just saved someone's life." The voice belonged to Special Investigator Dana Reyes, and as she stepped into the circle of officers, her presence shifted the room. Dana was not a typical federal liaison, for wore her past as quietly as a scar under the skin. Tall, sharp-boned, with a black suit that somehow looked both practical and severe. She carried no weapon, only a plain leather folder and a badge that needed no explanation. The others instinctively moved aside. Elena exhaled with visible relief. "Ma'am, I flagged the backpack as potentially linked to a child trafficking case in motion. Bruno tracked it." Dana looked down at the towel and the note, her eyes landing on the words "Help me" with a flicker. Then she knelt, picking up the paper herself, holding it in gloved hands for several seconds without speaking. Her voice, when it returned, was low. "Get me a trace on this number. Full telecom sweep, cell towers, voicemail, everything." Then she turned to Rowley. "And someone find me the owner of this bag, now." In less than 6 minutes, the airport's command center had rerouted surveillance feeds and begun a full forensic review of all digital entries associated with the Madrid flight, particularly passengers who had moved through security manually, those waved through after delays, or with expedited screenings. One of the technicians flagged a man who had approached the boarding gate 3 minutes before final call, using a valid boarding pass and passport under the name Nicholas Braun. The passport was scanned, facial recognition passed with 96% confidence, and the man had been cleared without incident. But when Dana requested a biometric rerun using TSA's cross-border scanner, something else surfaced. The fingerprint taken from the customs checkpoint matched a secondary entry in the Interpol registry, a subject flagged 4 years ago in a multi-agency sting in Tijuana. The name associated with that record was not Nicholas Braun. It was Javier Gutierrez, a known associate in a South American trafficking network that specialized in minors moved through Central America and up into the southern USA border. Elena stared at the screen, her fingers tightening around the folder she had been carrying. But the facial scan passed, she murmured. Dana didn't look away from the monitor. Face scans can be cheated. Silicone masks, altered bone structure, a few $1,000s and a surgeon in Juarez can make you look like a school principal from Ohio. But fingerprints? She tapped the screen. You can bleach them, burn them, but if they recover even once, back at the scene, Bruno lay beside the bag again, panting but relaxed. One of the junior officers, clearly still tense, muttered under his breath, "Still shouldn't have let the dog run loose. Lucky no one was bit." Dana turned her head sharply. "Son, if that dog had bitten someone, I'd be writing them a thank you note, not a complaint form. You ever look in the eyes of a 12-year-old girl who's been missing for 6 weeks? The officer dropped his gaze. "No, ma'am." Dana's voice stayed cold. "Then shut up and run the damn chain of custody form like you're supposed to." The phone number found inside the bag was now being traced through FBI telecom records. It had pinged cell towers 3 times over the past month, all in Baltimore, all near low-income group homes and temporary shelters. The name associated with those towers? Amira Louise Carter, age 10. Legal status Ward, State of Maryland. Last verified guardian, none. Previous foster placements, 3. Open case notes included a missed school enrollment in March, 2 flagged hospital visits, and a note that read, "Potential risk for flight." Elena stared at the screen and felt her stomach lurch. Dana had already begun mapping possible contact points. The motel in Queens, the group home in Baltimore County, and the identity shell used to file Nicholas Braun's travel clearance. The problem wasn't just the man's false name, it was that he had passed every layer of security with what appeared to be a clean record. Only the fingerprint, almost forgotten in an outdated registry, had given him away. Elena leaned over to Dana. "If his face is a lie and his name is a lie, we've got nothing to hold him with once he lands." Dana's jaw flexed. "Then we make sure when that plane touches down he's not met with baggage claim. He's met with cuffs." Meanwhile, another agent reported something new. The contents of the USB drive found in the second bag included encrypted images and manifest logs from shelters in 3 different states. Girls aged 9 to 14, all listed as transferred or runaways. One file, decrypted in real time, showed a photo of a mirror taken only 4 weeks prior. She was wearing the same hoodie, the same blank stare, but her name on the file read Jade Mendez, Elena whispered. "They change her name every time she's moved." Dana didn't flinch. "It's how they keep the paper trail disconnected. It's also how we lose them." A new voice joined over the radio. Chief Communications Officer Lyle Green. Patched in remotely from D.C., "Agent Reyes, we've confirmed the fingerprint identity. Gutierrez is a Tier 1 suspect with a dormant Interpol warrant. You have full jurisdiction to act as soon as he lands. Madrid authorities are prepped. He'll never step out of that jet bridge." But Dana didn't respond right away. She was staring at a wall monitor where CCTV from the boarding area earlier that day now looped again. She pointed. "There," she said. "Pause it." A tech complied. The screen froze on the exact moment Nicholas Javier guided Amira into the plane. Dana stepped closer. Zoom in on her left hand. The image clarified slightly, not perfect but enough. Amira was holding something. Dana's breath caught. "Is that a keychain?" Elena nodded slowly. "A horse. Silver plastic." She dropped it once, then picked it up before boarding. Dana stepped back. "Run that frame through all missing child reports in the national system. That keychain might be the only consistent thing she's carried." Bruna stood again, sniffing the air as if sensing a change. Dana looked at the dog, then to Elena. "You let us here. I trust he'll get us the rest of the way." At Barajas International Airport in Madrid, The atmosphere inside the customs terminal had begun to shift. Flight 238 had landed 15 minutes ago, and passengers were funneling into the arrivals corridor. Eyes heavy with travel fatigue, thoughts already drifting to hotel rooms, rental cars, or reunions beyond the glass walls. Among them walked Nicholas Braun, or rather, Javier Gutierrez. One hand placed lightly but firmly on Amira's shoulder as he steered her through the crowd. She moved robotically, her lips pressed together, the silver horse keychain hidden in her sleeve pressed so tightly into her palm it left an imprint. Her eyes scanned every sign, every security vest, but her feet didn't stop. She had learned long ago that resistance only made things worse. Gutierrez's movements were rehearsed. His face held no tension. His grip wasn't aggressive, just assertive enough. He'd done this before. The trick was to look casual but occupied, like a father worried about a child prone to distraction. But his luck ran out at Checkpoint 4, where two Spanish Guardia Civil agents stood waiting, their expressions unreadable. One of them held a tablet with his name on the screen. "Señor Braun," the taller one said in accented English. "Please step aside for a routine document verification." Gutierrez's smile flickered for a moment, but he nodded. "Sure, no problem." Amira's breath caught, but she didn't move. She stood still as the man holding her reached into his coat for his documents. That's when she noticed it. A sudden stiffness in his shoulders, a subtle shift of weight in his hips. He wasn't nervous about the papers. He was reaching for something else. Before anyone else registered the change, Javier's fingers found the hidden seam behind his belt buckle, and with one smooth motion, he pulled a folding blade from a fabric sheath stitched into the back of his waistband. The taller officer reached instinctively for his weapon, but Gutierrez was already moving. In a single fluid motion, he spun toward Amira, wrapped one arm tightly across her torso, and pressed the blade low against her ribs. Not deep, not drawing blood, just enough pressure to make the threat real. "Back the fuck off," he barked, the calm mask gone, his voice full of iron. "I swear to God, I'll cut her right here." The terminal froze. Passengers screamed and ducked. An alarm somewhere began blaring. Amira didn't scream. She couldn't. Her whole body seized, heart pounding so loudly she couldn't hear her own thoughts. Javier pivoted hard, dragging her toward the emergency exit door just beyond the customs booths. "Open it," he shouted. One officer hesitated. The other complied, overriding the lock. They knew the protocol. Hostage comes first. Gutierrez pulled Amira through and vanished into the maintenance corridor, metal doors slamming shut behind them. Miles away, back at JFK, Dana Reyes received the call through a secure FBI satellite channel patched to her mobile. Madrid Customs just lost him. He pulled a knife, took the girl, emergency corridor access confirmed, local authorities in pursuit. Dana's expression didn't change. Any intel on exit paths? They're heading into the lower-level engineering halls. No cameras down there, heat signatures are patchy. We've activated floor sense. Dana swore under her breath. Then, before she could give a command, a second feed crackled in. "We have one more variable. Your dog. He's gone." "Gone where?" Dana asked. "Disengaged from command. Bolted past gate 19, cleared the tarmac door before we could shut it." Bruno was already moving faster than the news. From the moment Gutierrez disappeared into that exit tunnel, something in Bruno locked into place. Not instinct, but something deeper. He didn't need a scent trail. He didn't need Elena's voice or anyone's permission. He had spent years learning what fear smelled like, what it sounded like, what it felt like pressed into the linoleum tiles of an airport floor. That little girl had walked past him once, radiating it, and now she was alone again, underground, surrounded by cement and steel and echoing danger. His paws hit the emergency door full force, his momentum cracking the hydraulic arm just enough for his weight to shove it open. The maintenance corridor reeked of ammonia, old metal, and the bitter aftersmell of machine grease. But Bruno followed the faintest thread of panic, a dry scent under the chemicals. His breath stayed steady, chest low, ears pinned forward. A janitor shouted in surprise as he streaked past, but Bruno, he passed the boiler room, skidded near a turn, then paused. A whimper, a shuffle, then silence. He let out a single drawn-out howl, not a bark but a sound trained for emergencies. a frequency designed for responders to locate buried victims in rubble in subways and tunnels. The sound bounced against the steel walls, echoing through the hall like a siren made of instinct. 10 seconds later, 2 officers above ground picked up the signal on their handheld receivers. K9 beacon pinged. Sublevel 3, West Mechanical Wing. Move, move. Inside the corridor, Gutierrez heard it too. He gritted his teeth, dragging Amira tighter against his chest. That fucking dog, he spat. They sent the dog after me? Amira didn't answer. She couldn't. Her entire body trembled. But for the first time, she knew someone was coming. Not just anyone. Him. The one who had looked at her like she mattered. Bruno slowed his steps, shoulders rigid, nostrils wide. His eyes scanned every junction, ears flicking to every shift and echo. Then he heard the drag of a shoe, the accidental scrape of fabric on a metal pipe. He turned left, toward the old fire access tunnel. It was dark, unlit, and smelled of rust and old electricity. He stepped in anyway. A flashlight flicked on ahead. Gutierrez, now panting, his face smeared with sweat, eyes wide. Don't back. Bruno kept walking. I'll do it, he shouted again. But Bruno didn't care what he'd do, because this wasn't about threats. It was about time. And time was almost out. The underground levels of the airport rarely saw human footsteps. Built decades ago as part of a long-forgotten expansion plan, the service corridors twisted through concrete walls, intersected by steam vents, rusted staircases, and metal grates that creaked under the weight of time. The lights flickered inconsistently. Some halls were completely dark, and in this dim, silent maze, a girl's footsteps left a trail only those who truly knew where to look could follow. When the tactical team from Madrid's Policía Nacional entered Sublevel 3's West Mechanical Wing, their boots stirred fine layers of dust that hadn't moved in years. 2 officers walked point, rifles low, eyes sharp beneath night vision goggles. Behind them, a 3rd officer paused, shining a UV flashlight along the corridor floor. Wait, he murmured. Crouching, his gloved fingers traced over a faint impression, a shoe print no larger than a child's. He blinked, leaned closer, then sniffed slightly. There's powder here, not just dust. The team leader, Agent Mateo Rivas, stepped beside him. What kind of powder? The officer held the UV light steady. The footprints glowed faintly, outlined in a soft, chalky residue. White, dry, almost like talc. Its pattern too, look. He tilted the light to reveal scattered dots trailing along the prints, as though someone had carried the powder and let it spill in tiny bursts. This wasn't an accident. Someone's leaving a trail. Rivas narrowed his eyes. You're saying the girl's trying to be found? Either that, the officer muttered, or she's smarter than the guy dragging her around. 10 meters ahead, Bruno crouched low beside a rusted electrical conduit, his ears flicking, nose working overtime. He didn't need UV. He could smell the difference, the sterile, dusty cold of the corridor, broken by the warm, chalky scent of sweat mixed with something floral, almost sweet. A child's pocket, he guessed. Something she carried close. He pawed lightly at the floor, then turned back and let out another sharp, single howl. Back above ground, Elena and Dana were moving fast through the airport's operations deck, their boots echoing along the steel catwalks as they reviewed the new feed coming in from the tactical unit. When Dana saw the glowing footprints on screen, her breath caught in her throat. That's not an accident, she said, voice low but resolute. That girl's marking her path. Elena tilted her head. How would she even know to do that? Dana didn't answer immediately. Her eyes remained on the screen. Sometimes, she said finally, someone teaches you, because no one came for them. Meanwhile, deep in the corridor, Amira walked just fast enough to not be dragged but slow enough to let the powder fall. In her right pocket, hidden under the lining of her hoodie, was a small plastic vial of scented chalk dust. A novelty toy meant to leave colored trails on the sidewalk, something a volunteer had given her 2 group homes ago. She never used it until now. Her fingers trembled as she loosened the cap just enough for the powder to escape with every step. Her sister had told her once, long ago, while they sat on the floor of a bathroom stall in a shelter. If anyone ever takes you, you find something that leaves a mark, anything. Don't be quiet like I was. Don't disappear. Her sister's name was Kalisha. She had vanished a year and 4 months ago, pulled from their bunk one night and never returned. No caseworker ever filed a proper report, No foster parent followed up, just another lost girl. Amira was 6 when it happened. She remembered every sound of that night, the way Kalisha whispered "stay still" as the footsteps approached, and how the door never opened again. Now, walking down a hallway that smelled like burnt copper and old oil, Amira let the chalk fall like Kalisha had taught her. Quiet, steady, deliberate. Javier, still gripping her by the wrist, muttered curses under his breath. Why'd they put this damn access panel here? This map's all wrong. He tugged Amira harder, turning right at a junction with exposed pipes running along the ceiling. He hadn't noticed the powder. He hadn't seen the trail. His mind raced with panic and math. How many minutes did he have left before they sealed exits? How long until they matched his prints? How long until the girl became useless? He yanked her again. Move faster. But Amira knew now that someone was behind them. She had heard the howl. She had felt the echo in the metal beneath her feet. And she knew what Bruno's voice meant. A minute later, the tactical team reached the same fork and stopped. Riyadh dropped to one knee again. The footprints turned right. They went this way, he confirmed. He motioned forward. Slow and quiet. Don't spook them. Bruno didn't wait. He broke left for 2 meters, sniffed the air, then doubled back toward the chalk path. His paws followed the rhythm perfectly. When he reached the corner, he stopped and barked once, loud, firm, and clear. Mira flinched at the sound but didn't stop. Her legs burned. Her chest ached, but something inside her refused to go still again. Bruno surged forward, and behind him the tactical team followed in silence. Beneath the main terminals, past the maintenance hatches and generator corridors, was a space no one in the airport's daily operation ever needed to enter. A concrete-walled electrical control room outfitted decades ago to house backup systems in case of total power loss. It was cold, humid, and reeked faintly of ozone and dust-covered copper. The flickering lights overhead buzzed inconsistently, casting long shadows across the rows of gray cabinets and locked control panel. Inside that forgotten room, Amira sat on the floor, her wrists pulled tightly behind her back by a zip tie that cut into the skin just above her hoodie cuff. Her ankles were looped with another. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She had passed the point of pleading hours ago. Her cheek rested against the cold cement, her breathing short and sharp, and her eyes locked on a tiny pool of water collecting near the base of a rusted pipe. The only movement she could focus on to keep her mind from shutting down. Javier paced in front of her, sweating despite the cold. His jacket had been torn during the escape, his blade now tucked visibly into the back of his waistband. He held a walkie-talkie in his left hand, one of the airport's internal devices stolen from a distracted maintenance worker during the rush. Every few seconds he clicked button, listening for interference, trying to scan chatter. His eyes darted to the steel door behind him, the only entrance. "You're not gonna find us in time," he muttered, mostly to himself, then clicked the button again. "If anyone's listening, I want a flight. Military or private, doesn't matter where. I just want out. I've got the girl and I'm not bluffing. You think this is about ransom? Try again. You don't get me out of here, she doesn't get past sunrise." He let go of the button, breathing hard, then looked down at Amira. Her expression hadn't changed. That unnerved him. "You think I won't do it?" he snapped, stepping closer, crouching just enough to bring his face level with hers. "You think this is still some movie where the dog saves you at the last second? That dog's not coming, and even if it does, I've got a surprise for it." Unseen by either of them, 30 feet down the hallway, Bruno moved in silence. His body was low to the ground, his breathing shallow, every muscle tight. He had followed the scent trail without pause, ignoring doors, pipes, even flashes of light behind him. The girl's chalk had run out, but her scent hadn't. It had grown stronger. Now he was only feet from her. His ears twitched. A sound, a buzz, static, a voice raised. Bruno crouched lower, nose against the floor. But the moment his paws crossed the threshold into the room, something changed. It was almost imperceptible at first. A sharpness in the air, a chemical tang not present in the hall. His nose twitched once, then again, and then pain. A sudden, piercing disorientation behind his eyes. Bruno staggered sideways. The floor beneath his paws felt wrong, hot, and vibrating slightly. He tried to bark but only managed a low gurgle. His muscles contracted violently, and within seconds, His body dropped onto its side, legs twitching, tail rigid. He began to roll uncontrollably, his chest heaving as if he were drowning. Inside the room, Javier's head snapped toward the noise. He grinned. "Told you," he muttered. He stood, walked over to the metal grate just inside the doorway and kicked it lightly. Beneath it, a fine layer of white powder shimmered faintly in the weak light, nearly invisible unless you were looking for it. He had spread it earlier, just after securing the girl, sprinkling it from a pill bottle hidden in his waistband, a synthetic compound, nervous entry, designed to affect dogs specifically, something he'd learned years ago when moving children past border checkpoints guarded by canine units. A product smuggled in tiny vials, not lethal but disorienting enough to buy time, enough to turn an attacker into a writhing mess. Bruno tried to rise again, but collapsed, paws scraping against the concrete uselessly. His eyes were wide and glazed, foam beginning to collect at the corners of his mouth. Amira saw him for the first time, her heart jumping into her throat. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No, no, no." Javier laughed, not because it was funny, but because fear made him bold. "That's right, you see? He's not going to help you, nobody's coming." He walked over to Bruno and kicked him lightly with the side of his boot. "You got close, dog, real close." Mira closed her eyes. She remembered her sister's voice again. "If they hurt you, you stay loud. Not with your mouth, with your choices." So she shifted her body slightly, just enough to let her fingers feel the edge of the keychain still tucked into her sleeve. She curled it tight into her fist and then slowly, inch by inch, began to shift her weight toward the nearest control panel. Not to escape, not yet, but to reach something that might make a sound. Anything. Bruno coughed, a wet, struggling sound. Then he rolled again. He was trying to crawl forward, inch by inch, his body failing but his mind refusing to give in. Dana had trained him to handle pressure, heat, even blunt trauma. But this was different, invisible. He couldn't fight what he couldn't understand. Above them, Dana and Elena had reached the last known corridor near the signal lost. An engineer confirmed that below them lay an isolated room once used for emergency generators. Dana pointed to the blueprint. "There. That's where he took her." Elena read the specs. Single access point, no ventilation, no camera. Dana's jaw tightened. "Then we go in fast or not at all." Bruno's limbs twitched uncontrollably near the doorway, his chest heaving with each labored breath as his muscles convulsed against the invisible toxin coating the floor. His eyes, fogged and dilated, still tracked Amira, as if urging her to move, to fight, to do something, anything, before it was too late. She didn't look away. Even though the sight of him struggling broke something in her chest, she didn't let it stop her. Instead, she closed her eyes for just a moment, and remembered the video her sister had shown her on a borrowed phone 2 summers ago at the group home, their legs tucked under a shared blanket as the screen glowed between them. "You gotta learn this," Kalisha had whispered, her fingers fast-forwarding past a tutorial intro. "It's dumb at first, but if they ever take you, you use your hair clip, not your voice. Locks don't scream." Amira had watched, unsure, amused even, as a girl barely older than Kalisha used a bobby pin to slip out of plastic cuffs in under 10 seconds. She hadn't thought of it since, until now. With every fiber of her small body straining against fear, Amira bent her wrists behind her back, twisting her shoulders painfully until she could press her thumbs against the hem of her hoodie sleeve. The hair clip was still there, buried in the inner seam where she always hid it during check-ins. Metal thin, cheap but unbent. She pressed it free with effort and began blindly working it against the zip tie's locking ridge. Teeth gritted not from pain but from the fear of being caught mid-move. Javier had turned his back again, muttering into the stolen walkie-talkie, demanding the plane, threatening again to sell Amira piece by piece if he didn't get what he wanted. "Heart's clean, kidneys are fresh, she hasn't even hit puberty, there are people who pay double for that," he snapped to whoever was listening, pacing now, one hand gripping the knife handle behind his back. The first zip tie clicked looser. Amira kept her breathing shallow. Another twist, a shake, and then snap. Her wrists came free so suddenly she almost let out a breath too loud. She froze again, eyes darting. Javier hadn't noticed. Good. Her ankles were still bound but not tightly. She could shuffle. She could reach, but she didn't run. Instead, She began to whimper, just once, soft enough to make him turn his head, then again, louder, dragging it into a cry that sounded both afraid and close to breaking. Exactly what he expected from a kid this deep in the dark. "Please," she said, voice cracking, "please don't leave me here if he dies. I'll do what you want. Just don't leave me with the dog." He walked toward her, blades still in hand, eyes cold. "Took you long enough." She let her chin tremble. "I'll listen now, I promise. I won't do anything. I'll help you get out." He was 3 feet away when she shuffled forward on her knees. Slow, submissive, just like she had seen older girls do when they were terrified enough to lie. "Please," she whispered again. "Take me with you, just don't leave me here." Javier crouched slightly, half curious, half disgusted. "What changed your tune?" She nodded toward the barely conscious Bruno. "He was the only one who came for me. If he dies, there's no one else." Javier laughed again, but leaned in closer, the knife lowering ever so slightly. "Well, that's true." He reached forward to grab her wrist again, and that's when her hand darted toward the loop in his front belt. Not the knife, not the gun, the small silver carabiner he used to clip the emergency door keys to his waistband. Her fingers found it, yanked. He reacted instantly, twisting and raising the blade, but she rolled away just in time, the keys clutched in her hand, her knees scraping against the cement as she half crawled, half dragged herself toward the far side of the room where the exit panel sat embedded in the wall. She didn't even look back to see if he was following. She just moved. Her heart beat so loudly it nearly deafened her. Every breath felt like a scream. Javier roared behind her, charging, but she reached the panel first. Her hands shook violently as she jammed the key into the slot, blood from her scraped wrist smearing the buttons. The lock clicked. Not all the way, not open yet, but click. That was enough. The lock gave way with a final metallic groan as Amira's trembling fingers yanked the door open. And for the first time since she'd been dragged into that underground maze, real light spilled into the room, followed instantly by the commanding echoes of boots and shouted Spanish orders reverberating down the corridor. Javier turned too late. The tactical unit flooded through the opening, weapons raised, lights blinding. "Manos arriba! Al suelo awath mío!" Javier lunged toward Amira. One last wild attempt, blade still raised. But before he could reach her, 3 red dots painted his chest and 2 warning shots struck the floor inches from his feet. He dropped the knife, then dropped to his knees, then dropped his head. When he was cuffed and pulled back against the wall, shaking with adrenaline and fury, no one even looked at him anymore. All eyes had gone to the small girl curled near the far corner of the room, her back pressed against the wall, arms wrapped tightly around the broken, heaving body of a German shepherd who had followed her into the dark and nearly died trying to bring her back out. Bruno's breaths came ragged, his flank rising unevenly, muscles twitching beneath the coat darkened by sweat and chemical residue. His ears didn't flick at the voices, his tail didn't move, but he was alive. And Amira knew that as long as he stayed breathing, she wouldn't let go. Her forehead rested against his head. One of the medics stepped forward, kneeling gently. "We need to lift him," he said softly. "We'll take care of him." The mirror didn't answer. She reached instead for the object hanging from the string around her neck. A cheap plastic keychain in the shape of a silver horse, cracked down one side from when it hit the floor during boarding. She gripped it tightly, then looked up at Dana Reyes, who had just entered the room and knelt beside her, face drawn with concern. The leader of the garden cloak, a man with muscle bone, has a chip inside. My sister told me to hide it. She filmed something. I was supposed to keep it until I could trust someone. Dana took the keychain gently, her hands gloved. She could see now that the back had been pried open once before, and inside the hollowed body of the horse was a sliver of black plastic and metal no bigger than a fingernail. A micro SD card, smudged but intact. Dana looked back at Amira, her voice caught somewhere between a breath and a vow. "We'll find out what's on it, I promise." Amira simply nodded, then returned her cheek to Bruno's neck and closed her eyes. The dog exhaled deeply, and for the first time his tail gave a single, weak thump against the floor. In the days that followed, the contents of the card were decrypted and reviewed by a joint task force. What they found changed the tone of the investigation entirely. The footage was grainy, filmed on a contraband phone hidden in a group home laundry basket, but the sound was clear. Voices of men laughing, girls crying, names read from a clipboard, and Kalisha's face, terrified as she was pulled into the back of a transport van. The timestamp and GPS metadata matched a state-run youth facility in Pennsylvania, but the transfer log for that day had no record of any girl named Kalisha Carter. She had been erased before she ever left the building. The footage, when overlaid with other recovered files from Javier's encrypted drives, revealed a transportation route spanning 8 states, 6 fake NGOs, and 3 supposedly licensed shelters. It wasn't just a trafficking case anymore, it was a federal conspiracy. The Department of Justice launched a multi-agency takedown. Arrests were made in Baltimore, Chicago, Tucson. At least 13 children were recovered, 2 of whom had been listed as deceased in foster system records. Amira was placed under full protection, her identity sealed, and her case transferred to the Federal Witness Program for minors. She had a new name now, a new city, and a new kind of freedom, but she asked for one thing to remain constant, that Brua was to be lived with organization. Bruno recovered slowly. The nerve agent had burned out a portion of his sensory perception, and though his hearing on one side never fully returned, his body remained strong and alert. The veterinarians declared him medically retired from tactical service, but the Bureau made an exception. His file was updated with a new status: companion, protective, assigned to Amira Carter, witness. On the morning of Bruno's retirement ceremony, held quietly at a small government facility upstate, Amira stood beside him, a medal in her hand, and placed it around his neck with fingers far steadier than anyone would have expected from a 10-year-old girl who had once walked barefoot across concrete, scattering chalk powder so someone might follow. Elena, in uniform, wiped her eyes from the back row. Dana stood still, arms crossed, mouth firm, but her eyes lingered long on the broken horse keychain now sitting in a glass case near the door. The card was gone, now logged as Exhibit A42, but the shell remained, a symbol not just of a message hidden, but of a girl who refused to disappear, and a dog who refused to stop. That night, as the sun fell over their small apartment in a protected town she would never name aloud, Amira sat on the floor beside Bruno's bed. She read aloud softly from a book, her voice steady, and though he didn't turn his head toward her the way he used to, he curled closer to her knees, and that was enough, because the sound of his breath had returned, because the loop had closed, because this time someone came. If this story moved you, consider liking and subscribing to support more true to higher, emotionally driven stories like this one. I'm curious, what part of Amira and Bruno's journey impacted you the most, and where in the world are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below.